I do want to share Shannon Schaefer's comment. Shannon says, what about the man in Las Vegas? We were talking about mental health issues. What about the man in Las Vegas? There were no signs of any mental health issues. I do agree that mental health is a big part of the problem, but it's not always so easy to single someone out as mentally ill enough to buy or not buy a gun.
It's going to be hard. It is. I mean, at some point you got to draw a line, and then anybody who's a near miss is going to be mad, and they're going to claim that somehow their Second Amendment rights have been compromised. So that is a problem. But you know, I mean, you have to go and take lessons to drive a car. You have to pass a test to drive a car. Why? Because if you don't, it might be dangerous. Okay. I could certainly see where you have to go and pass a test at least to get a gun, and then a background check. Certainly, you know, and I'm seeing everybody in Washington. No one is opposing the background checks. I don't even think the NRA is opposing background checks. So that's something that the president was talking about today, increasing the depth and the prevalence of background checks. So that seems to be something that's going to happen. I also think we heard today about Dick's Sporting Goods. Is not going to sell assault-style weapons anymore.
And
Walmart. Right, and the CEO from Dick's today was on our air talking about, we're going to take it on the chin from this. We're going to hear from gun rights advocates, and we're going to lose money from our sales, but we're not going to be a part of this anymore. I thought that was a good leadership position for them to take on that. But they are going to hear. They are going to hear.
He just said he didn't want to be part of the story anymore, you know, with the AR-15s.
I think with that, it's just also important to note with Dick's Sporting Goods, now they did take a similar stance after Sandy Hook, in which they said they weren't going to sell, you know, tactical rifles, but the difference this time, the CEO of Dick's said that this was permanent, right? As you said, they do not want to be a part of this story. They don't want to have anything to do with if anything were to happen in the future, they don't want to be a part of that. And then with Walmart, they won't sell guns to anyone younger than 21.
Which that addresses the school shooting. It wouldn't, which is what we're talking about here tonight. Something like Las Vegas, that would make no difference.
I do want to point out this was a really interesting comment. Cindy Huffman Anderson says, my son is a police officer for the city of Coral Springs and was one who responded to the shooting. He said it's easy to get on campus at 2:30 in the afternoon. It should not be. This was a lack of security. There was an officer on campus and he did nothing, as well as BOS officers. Kids need to be secure and safe. So this is someone who, you know, who's, I'm sure, speaking with her son in the days after, now weeks after this shooting, and has a unique, interesting perspective from someone who was in the area and who responded to that shooting. So he's talking about campus safety and how easy it is to get on school grounds 2:30 in the afternoon.
So it's just interesting to point out the officer who did not go inside and who's resigned says he thought the shooting was coming from the outside.
Claims.
I attributed that to him. So today President Trump brought in some lawmakers from both parties together at the White House. They're also talking about this issue. Let's listen in on some of what the president had to say.
You can't buy a handgun at 18, 19, or 20. You have to wait till you're 21. But you can buy the gun, the weapon used in this horrible shooting at 18. You are going to decide. The people in this room pretty much are going to decide. But I would give very serious thought to it. I can say that the NRA is opposed to it. And I'm a fan of the NRA. I mean, there's no bigger fan. I'm a big fan of the NRA. They want to do right. These are great people. These are great patriots. They love our country. But that doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. It doesn't make sense that I have to wait till I'm 21 to get a handgun, but I can get this weapon at 18. I don't know. So I was just curious as to what you did in your bill.
So both Republicans and Democrats seem to agree that stronger background checks are needed, but they have very different ideas on how that should look. Linda Salyer-Thacker says civilians should only be able to buy manual loading guns. So yeah, a lot of talk has come about the semi-automatic weapons.
Absolutely.
And you know, I got to tell you that you know, I grew up on a farm, and so you know, my grandfather, my dad, everybody hunted. And I mean, I've got a .22 that's been around forever. I mean, my grandfather gave it to me when I was a child. It's a semi-automatic gun. I mean, semi-automatic guns have been around for a long time. I mean, I think this gun before I, was used to shoot woodchucks in the field, so the horse wouldn't step in a hole and break its leg. I don't want to get into all that, but I mean, semi-automatic is a word that has been around for a long time, but now you've got these assault-style weapons, and they've got the removable, the clips, and you can put all these bullets in them at once, and you can, as fast as you can pull the trigger is how you can shoot. And it seems to me that attracts the type of people that are doing these things. And then you got the bump stocks where you can take a gun and make it, you just pull the trigger once and hold it down and it shoots like a machine gun. I don't see any reason why citizens have to have those.
And I know
Right?
President
I
Trump
mean,
has said that he supports banning bump stocks, and he has said that he plans to sign an executive order to ban them. So yeah, we'll see.
Charlie Burnett says, I feel like raising the age requirement is reasonable for new purchases, but you should still be allowed to be taught safety younger than that and be allowed to be gifted a firearm at a younger age. And Charlie, growing up in Allegheny County, you had to go through hunter safety. So that was a requirement in the 8th grade. So everyone, whether there was a gun in the home or not, you still had to go through a hunter safety, even if you didn't hunt, but it was still a gun safety class, basically.
So, but you know how to use the gun safely, but the fact is then you get somebody who's disgruntled at school.
Right.
And so, they know how not to shoot themselves while they're handling the firearm, but that doesn't keep them from taking that gun and going to school.
Being intentional, obviously.
And that's being intentional.
Yeah.
And so, and that's what we get back to.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about parenting. Do we have any comments on
my gosh,
parenting?
we do.
Because
We do. We have quite a bit.
I'm going to tell you that we've heard a lot about single mothers having a hard time taking care of their kids and so forth and so on, and kids just doing whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's part of the root cause. I don't know. I'd be curious what viewers think
Well,
about
I want to
that.
find this comment. There was one that I saw earlier.
I've got one in front of me right now while you
okay.
look for that.
Okay.
Ashley Balzer says bullying is the problem. It starts at home. If they're taught from day one that bullying will not be tolerated, then they will know that bullying isn't acceptable. So parents need to step up and teach their kids this. But until parents start doing this, the bullying will not stop. We're hearing a lot about bullying.
We are hearing
that was not so much on my radar.
Anthony Peterson says some parents can't handle or parent adequately. Certainly, this contributes to the breakdown in society. Emancipated adults with no future prospect contributes to our breakdown as well. Those non-skilled factory jobs killed our way of life. Not every former factory worker is a potential transition STEM beneficiary. So he's talking about just the breakdown of society, the breakdown of the family. We've heard a lot about that. In the weeks after this school shooting, and kind of how we got to this point, that big question. How did we get here?
How did we get here?
Found it. Okay, this
Go.
was from Andrea Russell. There are lots of single parents and married parents who have to work 2 and 3 jobs. Parents are not around now as they were in the 70s.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's
Well, so that's part of it. You got 2 parents who are working to make ends meet. Kevin Sarver says start holding kids and parents responsible for their actions. They need to be held responsible. So again, another parenting type thing. I think most of us, when we grew up, if we screwed up, we heard about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
We spent a lot of time.
Mom was not my friend.
Grounded. How long has it been since you heard of some kid being grounded? I don't know. Or worse.
This is a whole other. This
That's
is
a whole
I was about to say
whole
other
other
topic.
thing, right?
My parents still discipline me now, so.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
My dad was mad at. I'm 57. If my dad was mad at me, I would. I'd feel
Absolutely.
bad. Charlie Burnett says part of safety is hands-on training, and a parent should be able to gauge if their child is responsible enough to start learning to respect the firearm and safe handling. A lot of people wanting to talk about that.
Yeah.
Are we hearing much about teachers with guns from my phone is not loading. So I'm depending
We've had a
upon you
couple
guys.
people say basically how scared. What would be the threat level for a teacher to draw their weapon? Somebody said a threat level of 2.9.
Well, I mean, I can tell you what the threat level is for police. The threat level is there significant danger, and a police officer can fire if a gun is pointed at him, or if someone has already shown a preponderance to use lethal force than a police officer can fire. And I've gone through the FBI, you know, shoot, don't shoot scenario with like the animated thing. So I would think that would be the same litmus test for the teacher, right?
John DeLong says if a teacher does use their weapon, are they willing to bear the grief of taking a life even though they are saving lives? So there are a lot of, you know, it's back and forth, a lot of debate, obviously, with the teachers, but then, you know, a lot of people argue teachers didn't get into school security. That's not the field they went into.
But X% of everybody is going to say, you know what, I want to be the person with the gun. I feel like I'm that person. I grew up, I'm comfortable with guns. I mean, you know, if you have 100 teachers in a school, isn't there a certain percentage who are just going to feel like, yeah, I want to take this responsibility on. I want to be the 1 or the 2 or the 10.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good question, but you know, and one can make an argument. They're having to keep kids at a certain, you know, passing SOLs. They have all these other things to do. You know, that's a whole other issue of like making sure that you're meeting benchmarks and reaching standards, and the kids are reading at a level, and all the things that teachers do.
Well, maybe we're pushing,
and then on top of that, you're adding one more thing. Oh, by the way, you got to keep your class safe.
Oh yeah, you've got it. But, you know, so I think that's got to be volunteer. I think that's going to be volunteer.
Donnie Simpkins also said, I don't believe teachers should be burdened with the added responsibility of working security. Today, a teacher in Georgia carried a weapon to school and was arrested. Lisa Smith says, I think the teacher idea is good, but it should be on a volunteer basis, not a force thing. Some teachers are probably pro-gun and maybe even hunters. And I've actually heard people say that there probably are teachers who are carrying guns right now that we don't know about. That are probably just doing it.
So. But again, that's, you know, and you can be, because we have these no gun zones, no drug zones around schools. So that's one of the things that I've heard debated is, do politicians have to start softening that stance on the schools? Anthony Peterson says the Florida shooter chased a teacher before shooting him. Had he been armed, he may have survived, or perhaps the knowledge that teachers are armed would be a deterrent, and that might deter the shooting. So
well, that's it. That is an interesting. I was talking with a local sheriff last week, and he was saying that, and we were talking about school resource officers, but he said just having that presence, just somebody knowing that you have someone who's armed somewhere is a deterrent. If you look at, for example, somebody who is a thief, are they going to steal from somewhere that has a security officer outside, or are they going to steal from some place that has no one? They'll likely pick the place that has no one. So just someone knowing that a teacher somewhere is armed in itself could be a deterrent from something happening.
Right. Yeah. Lindsay, do you have the information on the march that's coming up
so
on the 14th?
We're going to segue into some activism here. And on March 14th, thousands of students plan to actually walk out of class for 17 minutes to support tighter gun control. And right now, only Floyd County and Radford City schools are planning on a positive way to honor that event. Parents in the Roanoke Valley are coming together next month to encourage safe gun storage through the One Day, One Voice March. We reported on this today. Organizers say making sure weapons and ammunition are secure, and that's a message that is nonpartisan and requires actually no legislation.
Why isn't this a bigger message? Why isn't this really pushed in our community the same as something like recycling? We really wanted this to be just a social norm, something that if you purchase a gun, you have a gun lock and you just keep it out of access of your children.
The group say they would like to see information on locking up guns and gun safety included with other back-to-school documents. So that would be sent home with the children.
Well, and of course, you go back to the Florida shooting. They had a gun safe, and the dad, he wasn't really the dad, he was the
caretaker,
custodial person, whatever, said he thought he had the only key to the safe. But the kid, you know, outsmarted him. Robin Bailey Taylor is saying that kids are desensitized by the countless murders on television, movies, and video games. I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
A very interesting fact.
And she said, I don't believe it's the leading cause, but it is significant. So we kind of maybe look at pulling the trigger differently than we did when we brought the the guns to school in the back of the pickup trucks.
I do also want to share this. Samantha Steidel said this is systematic and will take a system approach. For example, a 10-point plan involving background checks, mental health, bullying prevention, prescription abuse. A couple of people had commented about certain drugs being overprescribed, institutional support, bump stocks, intervention counselors, public relations, age requirements, making sure that guns are locked up. It's going to take a comprehensive approach.
So it's going to be a lot of things.
Yeah, right.
It's going to be a lot of things.
So going back to that, to the walkout and the activism that we were just talking about, Charlie Burnett says it's disheartening to see kids willing to walk out of school for a cause when befriending the bullied would have prevented a lot of the anger issues kids have nowadays. So bringing a different perspective there and following up.
So guys, I tell you what, we've talked about a lot of things tonight, and I appreciate, we couldn't get to nearly all the comments. They have been flooding in. So we appreciate this conversation. We had talked about maybe going to a school and doing a town hall meeting. And when we had the discussion that Lindsay mentioned at the very beginning of our chat here tonight, but that would have been so focused on one school or one community.
Right.
And so I think that this is an opportunity that we have with social media now that didn't exist a long time ago for all of us to talk to the community. And we heard it from all sides tonight. We heard people say arm the teachers. We heard people say don't arm the teachers. We heard a lot about parenting.
Yes.
And we also are hearing about what's going to happen with these walkouts. So
I think that's so the parenting part has been really interesting to see so many people comment on that. But I mean, we're not done. So this obviously this Facebook Live ends right now, but you can still post below, for days, weeks to come. Any ideas that you have, and we are going to keep monitoring that feed for story ideas to see, okay, what is it that you want? Which direction do you want us to go in? And then we'll move in that direction. So it's really the wheels in your hand.
Brittany, last thoughts?
Yeah, it's a discussion that is going to continue, not just here, but across the country. And just talking about that activism, I don't know, something seems very different with the students.
This time, yes. Yeah,
I mean,
it's the students this
They are
time.
very passionate, very enthusiastic, very determined and driven.
They're driving it.
Yeah.
And people are listening.
The Sandy Hook students were little. They're tiny. They're babies. And after Virginia Tech, that was different. That was kind of the first.
In the quote unquote modern age?
In the modern age, that was the first, and so it was kind of like, okay, that happened, but it won't happen again.
All right. Well,
so
folks,
this is different.
Look, thank you so much. We can't live in a world where our students are being shot in school. I mean, no matter what, whatever the solution is, we've got to keep talking about it. And we just want you to know that here at 10 News, that we want to talk about it. We want to find story angles that are important to you, and we want to look at this from all sides, okay? So just keep your comments coming. So for all of us at 10 News, thanks for your thoughts tonight and taking the time to take part in our discussion.